Bonjour, aujourd'hui vous prenez des notes sur l'impératif, l'infinitif, et le faire causatif. First, we're going to take a look at the formation of the imperative, which just means the command form in French. There are three forms of commands, tu, vous, and nous. In order to conjugate a verb in the command form, all you have to do is conjugate it regularly, but get rid of the subject pronoun. However, if you are conjugating an ER verb, that's a to command, you're also going to get rid of the letter S. And finally, if you have a reflexive verb, the ones that have the m, t, s that go along with it, you're going to attach the reflexive pronoun at the end. So to reiterate, there are only three forms of commands, because in order to give a command, you need to be talking directly to the person or people. Here's an example of the verb répondre in the various command forms. Here's an example of écouter, which is an ER verb, where we've taken off the letter S, so it's a to command. And here's the reflexive verb se reposer in its three command forms to show that you are asking the person to take a rest, or the multiple people to take a rest. And just to clarify, you wouldn't put the toi or the vous or the nous at the end of the verb répondre, for example, in this form, because répondre is not a reflexive verb unless you're trying to give the command for someone or some people to respond to themselves. Here are some irregular verbs in the imperative: avoir, to have, savoir, to know, and être, to be. And when you want to make an imperative a negative, all you have to do is put ne pas around the conjugated verb. If there is a reflexive pronoun, that reflexive pronoun comes before the conjugated verb. Next, we're going to look at some usages of the infinitive. Not to be confused with the imperative, the infinitive is when we haven't conjugated the verb. So some examples of when to use the infinitive in French are following a verb that we have already conjugated. So typically it would be the second verb in a sentence. Here's the example with je veux suivre ce cours, where I'm saying I want to take this course. You're also often going to use the infinitive after a preposition. Il travaille dur pour réussir, in order to succeed. If the infinitive is acting as the subject of the phrase, such as in the sentence obtenir un diplôme est une bonne idée, we're saying that obtaining a diploma is a good idea, or to obtain a diploma is a good idea. After the preposition après, we're going to use the infinitive past. So even though the infinitive is supposed to be a non-conjugated form typically, there is a past version of it, and you can see here we take the avoir, and then we have the verb, the participle, fini. So it's like the passé composé, except we didn't conjugate the avoir or the être. And the infinitive can be used in place of the imperative in order to give commands. For example, you might see the infinitive used on street signs or in recipes. So in general, the infinitive is just the unconjugated form of the verb. And if you have a reflexive verb that also happens to be in the infinitive, you would make sure that you keep the reflexive pronoun, but you might have to make it agree with the subject. So in the second example sentence on the right, je n'aime pas me réveiller tôt, we changed the se to me because je is the subject. Another example with using the past infinitive after the preposition après. This case, we have one of the Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp verbs, être rentré, to show after having returned, she started the homework. And if you would like to use the infinitive but make it negative, you're just going to put the ne pas before the infinitive. Again, here are some more examples on the left in English with the French translation on the right. And these examples show you how in English we actually might translate the infinitive a couple different ways. We might leave it as the infinitive. We might even put it in the ing form. Finally, we're going to take a look at the faire causatif. This is a structure in French that allows somebody to express that either they or somebody else is doing an action because someone is making them or asking them to do it. So the sentence here, that's the example. Je fais travailler mes élèves. I, as the teacher, I make my students work. Je me fais couper les cheveux. This is a very common example. You could go out and you could say, I cut my hair, or you could say, I got a haircut. And in English, we might understand those to be the same thing. However, if you say, I cut my hair, it could imply that you yourself were holding the scissors and made the cut. Whereas what is more often the case is that you went to a salon and somebody cut your hair for you. Finally, here are a couple more examples with the faire causatif to show that someone is making somebody else do an action on their behalf or for them. There you have it. In this lesson, we've seen 3 grammatical structures. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask in class. A bientôt.